The moons of Vega Prime cast strange shadows over Rust Harbor, a settlement that looked as if it were held together by hope and rusty nails. In his workshop, really just a glorified shed with delusions of grandeur, Ren Blackwell wiped sweat from his face with an oil-stained rag, somehow managing to make himself even dirtier in the process. "Perfect," he muttered to himself, eyeing his reflection in a piece of scrap metal. "Exactly the professional image I'm going for." The whine of his repair tools filled the otherwise quiet afternoon as he fixed a damaged air regulator. The local farmers needed these to survive, and though they barely paid enough to keep his lights on, Ren had learned long ago that on the frontier, you took whatever work came your way. The sound of heavy footsteps on the metal walkway made him look up. Through the heat waves rising from the desert floor, a figure approached, tall, armored, and definitely not local. The stranger wore battle gear unlike anything Ren had seen in his years on Vega Prime. It featured flowing lines that reminded him of liquid metal, though now it was badly damaged with burn marks and fractures. "You fix things?" The voice was female, with an accent that made ordinary words sound like poetry. "Depends," Ren replied, straightening his back with an audible crack. "I fix things that can be fixed, and I tell people when they are better off buying new." "Which category are you in?" He examined the extensive damage to her armor. Energy weapons impacts had left scorch patterns across the chest plate. There were cracks in the shoulder joints, and a power line was clearly malfunctioning, evidenced by the irregular flashing of the suit's status lights. "And more importantly," he added, "can you pay? Equipment like that isn't from around here, which means parts won't be cheap, assuming I can even find them." The armored figure reached into a hidden compartment and produced a translucent crystal that caught the sunlight, sending rainbows dancing across the workshop walls. Ren nearly swallowed his tongue. That tiny piece of stellarite was worth more than his entire workshop made in 2 years. "Will this cover your expenses?" she asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Yeah," Ren managed, trying not to stare at the crystal. "That'll do just fine. I'm Ren Blackwell. And you would be—" The stranger paused just a beat too long. "You may call me Lyra." "All right, Lyra," he said, not bothering to hide his skepticism at the obviously fake name. "Let's see what we're working with. Step over to my high-tech diagnostic station." He gestured toward a beaten-up platform surrounded by salvaged equipment. Lyra moved toward it with a slight limp. As she stepped into the light, Ren noticed more details. Her armor was beyond advanced, and whatever battle she'd survived had been serious. "So," he said casually, "should I be expecting whoever did this to you to come knocking at my door? Because I just painted the place, and plasma burns are hell to cover up." Lyra made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I don't anticipate they were able to track me here." "That's reassuring in absolutely no way whatsoever," Ren muttered, running his scanner over her armor. The readout made his eyebrows shoot up. "This is military-grade tech. Not just any military, this is high command stuff. What are you? Some kind of special forces?" Lyra's hands paused as she removed a section of armor. "I found myself in the wrong place at the wrong time." "Yeah, funny how special forces soldiers with experimental armor just accidentally stumble into firefights," Ren said, but dropped the subject when she didn't respond. "Power cores at 28% capacity. Support structure has microfractures throughout. Environmental systems are completely fried." He looked up sharply. "How long have you been running on emergency life support?" 4 days. Ren blinked. 4? You should be dead. This suit is running on fumes and good intentions at this point." "I'm resilient," she said simply. "No kidding. My ex-girlfriend's houseplant was resilient. You're something else entirely." As Ren began disassembling her armor, he found himself watching this mysterious client. There was something in the way she held herself, straight-backed and confident. that suggested a person used to giving orders, not taking them. But everyone in Rust Harbor was running from something, so he kept his questions to himself. The work was delicate and demanding. Each component needed careful handling, and Wren found himself slipping into that focused state where nothing existed except the task at hand. "Your technique is impressive," Lyra observed after a while. "You have unusual skill." 22 years of practice," Wren replied without looking up. "Started as a kid helping my mother maintain transport ships. She always said, if you can't fix it with spare parts and swear words, you're not trying hard enough. Your mother taught you well. She was chief engineer on the CSS Meridian. Decorated officer. Brilliant woman." Bitterness crept into his voice. Not that it mattered when the reactor containment failed. Lyra remained silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry for your loss." Wren shrugged, focusing on a circuit board. "Ancient history. The point is, I learned that everything breaks eventually. But almost anything can be fixed if you understand what makes it tick." As evening approached, Lyra removed the remaining pieces of her armor. Beneath it, she wore a form-fitting bodysuit that accentuated her athletic frame. Her skin was a rich blue, like the deepest parts of an ocean, with intricate silver patterns spiraling along her arms and neck. "I've never seen markings like those," Wren said, trying to sound casual while absolutely failing. "They are traditional among my people. And your people would be—" Another calculated pause. "Not from around here." "No kidding," Wren said with a snort. "I thought blue skin and living metal armor were all the rage in the South District." That earned him a small smile, which he counted as a victory. "Your armor needs at least 3 days of work," he continued. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" Lyra looked momentarily uncertain. "I had not anticipated such a delay. There's a boarding house 5 blocks from here. Reasonably clean, decent food. Old Tavi, who runs it, doesn't ask questions as long as you pay up front." He hesitated, then added, "Or there's a cot in the back room if you are short on funds. I crash there myself when work runs long." "You would offer shelter to a stranger?" She sounded genuinely surprised. Wren gestured at her partially disassembled armor, which contained enough weaponry to level half the settlement. "If you wanted to kill me and take my stuff, you'd have done it already. Besides, that Stellarite could buy this entire block. You're not exactly desperate." Something shifted in her expression. A reassessment. "Most people fear what they do not understand. Should I be afraid of you?" "Many would be. Many people haven't seen what I've seen," Wren replied, turning back to his work. "After you've watched a colony ship's reactor core go critical, regular people stop being scary. Even blue ones with fancy armor." As night fell, and the 3 moons aligned in their monthly conjunction, Lyra accepted his offer. "The cot will suffice, thank you. Don't mention it. Just don't steal my tools. They're not worth much, but they're all I've got." But as he watched her settle into the back room, Wren couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a sharp turn into uncharted territory. Outside, the desert winds carried the scent of the coming storm season, and with it, the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Wren was already 3 hours into his work when Lyra emerged the next morning. She moved with natural grace despite her injuries, her silver blue hair now braided away from her face. "Coffee's on the burner," he called without looking up from the power core he was recalibrating. "Fair warning, it tastes like engine degreaser with a hint of regret." "Thank you." Her voice had a morning roughness that made her seem more approachable. She poured herself a cup and moved to his workstation, watching as he carefully realigned the crystal matrix at the heart of her armor. "Fascinating," she murmured. "You're using quantum resonance to stabilize the energy pattern. Most technicians would simply replace the damaged sections." Wren paused, looking at her with new interest. "You know something about power systems." "I've had some training." A shadow crossed her features. Though I've never seen anyone work quite like you do. How so? You treat each component as if it were alive, as if you're healing it, rather than merely repairing it. Ren felt his ears grow warm at the unexpected compliment. My mother used to say everything has a pattern, a pulse. Break the pattern, you get malfunction. Restore it, you get harmony. He shrugged self-consciously. Probably sounds like mystic nonsense to someone with your background. No, Lyra said softly. It sounds like wisdom. They worked together after that, Lyra occasionally handing him tools or holding components steady. Her hands were surprisingly skilled, with long fingers that moved with practiced precision. Each time their hands brushed, Ren found himself increasingly aware of her presence, the warmth of her skin, the subtle scent that reminded him of distant stars. Tell me about this place, she said during their lunch break, as they shared protein bars that tasted vaguely like sweetened cardboard. Rust Harbor? Used to be a mining operation. When the minerals ran out, the company left. But people stayed. Traders, scavengers, folks running from something. He glanced at her meaningfully. It's a good place to disappear. And you? Did you come here to disappear? The question caught him off guard. Never thought about it that way. I fix things. People here need things fixed. Simple as that. But don't you want more? There was something almost desperate in her voice. Don't you desire purpose beyond daily survival? Ren studied her profile as she gazed out at the desert. You sound like someone who's had too much purpose. Sometimes I think the universe could use more people just trying to get by and fewer people with grand plans to change everything. She turned to face him, her indigo eyes intense. What if changing it was the only way to protect those who matter to you? Then I guess you'd have to decide if saving them was worth becoming someone they wouldn't recognize. The words hung between them like a challenge, and Ren saw something crack in her carefully maintained composure. For just a moment, she looked vulnerable, lost, and deeply alone. I overstepped, he said awkwardly. Not my business. No, her voice was barely a whisper. You saw right through me. That afternoon, as Ren worked on the neural interface of her helmet, Lyra began to talk, not about herself directly, but about isolation and responsibility. She spoke of watching worlds burn from command bridges, of decisions that saved millions while condemning thousands, of the crushing loneliness that came with authority no one else could understand. The hardest part, she said, drawing patterns in the dust on his workbench, is that everyone sees the position, the power, the authority, but never the person underneath. After a while, you start to wonder if there's anyone left under there at all. Ren's hands stilled. There is. How can you be so certain? He looked at her then, really looked at her. The elegant line of her jaw, the way the afternoon light caught the silver in her markings, the vulnerability she was trying to hide behind her composed exterior. Because yesterday, when you thought I wasn't looking, you fixed my broken calibration tool without being asked. Because this morning, you made the coffee stronger after hearing me complain it was too weak. His voice softened. Someone who's forgotten how to be a person doesn't notice the little things that matter to others. Lyra's breath caught, and when she looked at him, there was something raw and hopeful in her expression. You see too much, Ren Blackwell. Or maybe everyone else isn't paying attention. The space between them seemed to shrink, charged with an energy that had nothing to do with the power cores scattered around the workshop. Lyra reached out tentatively, her fingertips just brushing his cheek, where a smudge of grease had left a dark streak. You have. What? He asked, leaning slightly into her touch. Engine oil, metal shavings, the rugged charm of a frontier mechanic. She laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and bright, and the sound did something strange to Ren's chest. All of the above, perhaps. Lyra, he said quietly, and her name felt important somehow. She pulled back suddenly, but not before he caught the flash of longing in her eyes. The armor. We should continue. Right. The armor. But neither moved for a long moment, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging between them. That evening, as the moons rose and painted the sky in brilliant purples, they worked by lamplight to complete the final calibrations. Every casual touch and exchanged glance now carried new meaning. There, Wren said finally, stepping back to admire their work. Good as new. Better than new, actually. I reinforced the power relays and upgraded the environmental systems. Lyra ran her hands over the restored armor, marveling at the seamless repair work. It's extraordinary. You've made it stronger than before. Sometimes things need to break before they can become what they're meant to be. She looked at him, then with an expression that made his heart race. Is that what's happening to me? Before he could answer, she stepped closer. Close enough that he could detect the subtle scent of her skin, see the way her lips parted slightly as she looked up at him. The rational part of his mind reminded him that he knew nothing about her, that she was dangerous and clearly hiding something significant. But the way she was looking at him, like he was something precious and unexpected, made all of that seem suddenly irrelevant. Lyra, he whispered. And then she was kissing him, soft and urgent and desperate, as if trying to memorize the feel of his lips against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she pressed her forehead against his chest. I should go, she said, but made no move to leave his embrace. Should and want are rarely the same thing, he replied softly. No, she agreed, her voice muffled against his shirt. They rarely are. But she remained there in his arms as the desert wind whispered through the open bay doors. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Wren felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The attack came at dawn. Wren woke to the sound of engines screaming overhead and the sharp crack of weapons fire nearby. Lyra was already moving, her earlier tenderness replaced by deadly focus as she pulled on her armor with practiced efficiency. What the hell? Wren started, but she cut him off with a sharp gesture. Stay down. Don't leave the workshop. Her voice had changed completely, taking on the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Like hell I won't. This is my home, The workshop entrance exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Through the smoke came figures in sleek combat armor, weapons trained on Lyra as she stood partially suited, her helmet still in her hands. Your Sovereign Excellence, the lead figure said, voice distorted by a modulator but clearly mocking. The hegemony sends its regards. Lyra, but that wasn't her real name, was it? Drew herself up to her full height, and suddenly Wren could see what he'd been blind to before. The unconscious authority, the way she moved like she expected the universe to bend to her will. Dravos, she said calmly, as if commenting on the weather. I should have expected you'd find me. Though I'm impressed by your response time. Did you have tracking devices planted throughout the sector, or just a very enthusiastic spy network? Your Excellence's absence from the capital caused quite a stir. The hegemony has many friends in the Sovereign Council. Betrayed. The word hung unspoken in the air, but Wren could see it in the sudden tension around her eyes, the way her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What do you want? Wren demanded, stepping protectively in front of her despite her earlier warning. She's just passing through. She's got nothing to do with your political garbage. The assassin's weapon swung toward him, and Wren found himself staring down the barrel of a weapon that could turn him into atoms in an instant. The human speaks, the assassin observed with amusement. How quaint. Your Excellence has been slumming, I see. Leave him out of this, the woman said sharply. Your quarrel is with me. Oh, but he's already involved, isn't he? The great sovereign Nalani, ruler of the Cerulean Dominion, hiding among the dregs of civilization, playing at being just another refugee. The assassin's weapon never wavered from Ren's chest. I wonder what she promised you, little human. Power, wealth, a place in her bed? I don't know what you're talking about, Ren said through gritted teeth. But his mind was reeling. Aetherin? Cerulean Dominion? That wasn't just some minor government. The Cerulean Dominion controlled a quarter of the known galaxy. Didn't she tell you? The assassin's laughter was cold and electronic. Your little refugee is the most powerful person in Charted Cesis, ruler of 800 worlds, commander of fleets that could reduce entire systems to dust. The weapon moved slightly, centering on Ren's heart. And she's been lying to you from the moment she walked through your door. Ren felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Everything he thought he knew, every moment they'd shared. How much had been real? How much had been the calculated manipulation of someone born to rule? Ren, Nalani said quietly, and there was something broken in her voice. Please, let me explain. Explain what? He turned to face her, the hurt in his eyes making her flinch. That everything you told me was a lie? That while I was fixing your armor and falling for you, you were laughing at the stupid mechanic who didn't know he was talking to the ruler of a quarter of the galaxy? No. The word came out fierce and desperate. No, it wasn't like that. Nothing about what happened between us was a lie. How would I know? The pain in his voice was raw and obvious. How could I possibly know what's real with you? Before she could answer, the workshop filled with the whine of charging weapons. More figures had appeared in the doorway, but these wore different armor, more ornate, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained power. Sovereign Guard, one of them barked. Stand down immediately. The lead assassin spun toward the new arrivals, weapon tracking toward the nearest guard. But Nalani was already moving. Her partially donned armor didn't slow her down as she dove, rolled, and came up with a sidearm that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The energy bolt that erupted from her weapon turned the assassin into vapor before he could complete his turn. The workshop erupted into chaos. Energy bolts flew in all directions, scorching metal and setting supplies ablaze. Ren dove behind his workbench as the air filled with the acrid smell of burning synthetics. Through the mayhem, he caught glimpses of Nalani in action, and it was terrifying to behold. She moved like violence personified. Her earlier grace transformed into something lethal and precise. Every shot found its target. Every movement flowed into the next with the efficiency of someone trained from birth to survive. This wasn't the woman who had shared his coffee and talked about loneliness. This was the sovereign of the Cerulean Dominion, and she was magnificent and terrible in equal measure. The battle lasted less than 2 minutes. When the smoke cleared, the assassins were dead or dying, and the sovereign guards were securing the area. Nalani stood in the center of it all, breathing hard but victorious, her armor splattered with blood that wasn't her own. Your Excellence, the lead guard said, dropping to one knee. We came as soon as we detected your emergency beacon. The fleet is in orbit, awaiting your orders. How many vessels? She asked, her voice once again carrying that note of absolute authority. 53 warships, Excellence, including the Starborn. Ren felt his legs give out. 53 warships, a fleet capable of reducing entire planets to rubble, had come looking for the woman who had spent 3 days drinking his terrible coffee and fixing her armor in his workshop. Nalani turned toward him then, and he saw the exact moment she realized how he was looking at her. The hope in her eyes died, replaced by something that looked almost like grief. Ren, she began, but he held up a hand to stop her. Don't. His voice was hollow. Just don't. I get it now. You're not Lyra. You never were Lyra. You're something so far beyond me that I can't even comprehend it. That's not true, isn't it? He laughed bitterly. You command fleets. You rule hundreds of worlds. People kill and die at your word. And I'm what? A grease-stained mechanic on a backwater planet who fixes broken things for scrap metal. You're the person who saw me, she said quietly. The only person in years who looked at me and saw someone worth talking to instead of something to be used or feared or worshipped. Your Excellence, the guard interjected urgently. We need to leave. The hegemony will send more assassins, and our intelligence suggests they have sympathizers throughout this sector. Nalani nodded without taking her eyes off Ren. Prepare for immediate departure. She took a step toward him. Come with me. What? Come with me back to the Dominion. I can give you anything you want. A workshop that would make this place look like a child's toy. Resources you've never dreamed of. As what? Your pet human? The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but he was hurt and angry and trying to process that the woman he'd fallen for ruled more systems than he could name. She recoiled as if he'd struck her. Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think of you. 3 days ago, you were Lyra, a mysterious stranger with battle damage and beautiful eyes. Now you're telling me you're a sovereign who could probably buy this entire planet without noticing the expense. How am I supposed to reconcile that? By trusting that the woman who kissed you last night is the same person standing here now. Your Excellence, the guard pressed. Please. Nalani closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, Ren saw the exact moment she put the mask back on. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the cool composure of someone born to rule. Very well. Her voice was steady, professional, empty of the warmth it had carried before. Compensation will be provided for the damage to your workshop. The Dominion does not forget its debts. She turned to go, then paused at the ruined doorway. For what it's worth, she said without looking back, Lyra was never a lie. She was just the person I might have been in a different life. And then she was gone, surrounded by her guards, leaving Ren alone in the wreckage of his workshop and the ruins of the most perfect 3 days of his life. Well, he said to the empty room, that's going to make for one hell of a story at Tavi's bar. The time I dated a galactic ruler and didn't know it. No one's going to believe a word. 3 weeks passed. Ren threw himself into rebuilding the workshop, using the compensation the Dominion had provided. Enough credits to rebuild his entire block, 10 times over. Rust Harbor buzzed with speculation about the incident, but the official story, a confrontation between mercenary groups, satisfied most curiosity seekers. You know, Mira-sen said one evening in her cantina, sliding a drink toward him. For a man who just got his workshop upgraded with tech I've never even seen before, you look like someone stole your favorite wrench. Just tired, Ren replied, though they both knew it was a lie. He'd almost convinced himself he was moving on when the familiar silhouette appeared in his doorway just after sunset. This time she came alone. Hello, Ren. She looked different without the armor, dressed in simple traveling clothes that did nothing to diminish her natural grace. The silver markings on her skin seemed dimmer somehow, as if reflecting her subdued mood. Lyra. The name slipped out before he could stop it, and he saw her flinch slightly. Or should I say Your Excellence? Just Nalani, please. I'm not here as a sovereign. Could have fooled me. There are probably 50 snipers aimed at this building right now, aren't there? She smiled slightly. Only 23. I ordered them to keep their distance. Despite himself, Ren laughed. At least you're honest about it this time. She stepped into the workshop, her eyes taking in the improvements. I couldn't stay away. I've tried, but... She shrugged helplessly. I keep thinking about what you said about things needing to break before they can become what they're supposed to be. Nalani, I've been sovereign for 16 years, she continued as if he hadn't spoken. Since I was 22. My entire adult life has been duty and responsibility and making decisions that affect billions of lives. And in all that time, I'd never met anyone who made me feel like just a person. Ren set down the tool he'd been holding, his hands suddenly unsteady. What are you asking me? I'm asking for one night. Her voice was barely above a whisper. One night where I'm not a sovereign, and you're not thinking about all the reasons this is impossible. One night where we're just two people who found something unexpected in each other. And then what? You go back to your empire, and I go back to fixing broken machines on a backwater planet. We pretend this never happened? If that's what it takes. There were tears in her indigo eyes now, though she held them back with the iron control of someone trained never to show weakness. I know I have no right to ask this of you. I know I've already hurt you. But I can't stop thinking about the way you looked at me before you knew who I was. You realize this is completely insane, right? Ren said, running a hand through his hair. You rule 800 worlds. I fix air regulators for farmers who pay me in root vegetables half the time. I'm well aware of the absurdity. And you still came back. I did. Ren crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, cupping her face in his calloused hands. You want to know how I look at you now? I look at you and see the woman who makes terrible coffee at dawn because she knows I'll be working early. I see someone who laughs at my bad jokes and argues with me about quantum mechanics and falls asleep reading technical manuals because she finds them relaxing. Ren, I look at you and see someone who's been carrying the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders for so long, she's forgotten what it feels like to just exist. And yes, the whole sovereign thing terrifies me, but not because of the power, because I'm terrified of how much I care about you. The tears spilled over then, tracking silver down her blue cheeks. I care about you too, more than I should, more than is safe for either of us. He kissed her then, soft and desperate, tasting salt and sorrow, and something that might have been hope. She melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, as if she could anchor herself to this moment, to him, to the possibility of being something other than what duty demanded. One night, she whispered against his lips. One night, he agreed, though they both knew it was a lie. He led her to the small quarters behind the workshop, the same room where she'd slept during those first days when she was still mysterious, Lyra, and he was still naive enough to think the universe might let him keep something good. In the privacy of his simple room, with only starlight filtering through the single window, she let the mask fall away completely. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for him, and he realized that for all her power and authority, she was as uncertain about this as he was. I don't know how to be just a woman, she admitted, her voice small and vulnerable. I've been a sovereign for so long. Well, I don't know how to be with a woman who commands 53 warships, so I guess we're both improvising here. She laughed, the sound warm and real, and then she was kissing him again, and words became unnecessary. Later, she lay curled against his chest, tracing lazy patterns on his skin with her fingertips. In the afterglow, she looked younger somehow. The constant tension that seemed to live in her shoulders finally released. Tell me about your dominion, he said quietly. The real version, not the political overview. She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. It's dying, she finally said. What? Not obviously. Not in any way the council or the military command would recognize yet. But I can see it in the reports, in the subtle shifts in resource allocation, in the way certain sectors have stopped responding to administrative requests. She sighed. The hegemony isn't just attacking me personally. They are systematically undermining sovereign authority, buying off governors and admirals, turning my own people against the crown. How long do you have? If I can't stop them, maybe 6 years before open rebellion, 12 before total collapse. Her laugh was bitter. 800 worlds, Ren. Trillions of people who depend on Dominion protection and trade networks and civil services. When it falls, the chaos will make the old sector wars look like minor disagreements. Ren felt the weight of it settle over him. He'd been thinking about this in personal terms, him and her, the mechanic and the sovereign. But she was talking about the potential death of civilization across a quarter of the galaxy. So what's your plan? He asked, surprising himself with how calm he sounded. My plan? Yeah. You don't strike me as the type to just sit back and watch your empire crumble. You must have some ideas. She shifted to look at him, surprise evident in her expression. You're asking about my strategy against the hegemony? Now? After everything? Well, it seems like a pretty big deal. 800 worlds and all that. He shrugged. Besides, I fix things. It's what I do. A slow smile spread across her face. You are the most remarkable man I've ever met, Ren Blackwell. That's just because you hang out with too many politicians. Now tell me about this hegemony problem. They talked long into the night, Nalani explaining the complex web of politics and power that threatened her realm, Ren listening and occasionally offering insights that made her look at him with renewed wonder. His perspective, practical, direct, unburdened by centuries of political tradition, made him see solutions where her advisors saw only obstacles. When dawn finally crept across the horizon, they lay tangled together in his simple bed, watching the light paint patterns on the wall and pretending the universe wasn't about to pull them apart again. I have to go, she said finally, though she made no move to leave his arms. I know. My ship is waiting at the spaceport. If I don't return soon, they'll come looking for me. That would be awkward. Sorry, Your Excellence is currently naked and doesn't want to be disturbed. She laughed, swatting his arm playfully, but then grew serious. There will be complications after this. The hegemony has agents everywhere. They might try to use you against me. Ren felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. What kind of complications? I don't know. But promise me if anyone comes asking questions about me, about what happened here, you tell them nothing. Not out of loyalty to the Dominion, but for your own safety. Nalani, promise me. Her voice carried the full weight of sovereign authority now, and he was reminded again of exactly who and what she was. I promise. But for the record, I hate this. So do I. She dressed quickly, efficiently, transforming herself back into the sovereign with every piece of clothing she put on. By the time she was fully clothed, the vulnerable woman who had shared his bed was gone, replaced by the ruler of 800 worlds. At the door, she paused. Thank you for seeing me, for giving me something I didn't know I needed. What was that? Hope. She smiled, sad and beautiful and utterly heartbreaking. The knowledge that even in the darkness, there are still people worth fighting for. And then she was gone, leaving him alone with the lingering scent of her skin and the terrible certainty that he would never see her again. 6 months later, the ships came. Ren first noticed them as pinpricks of light against the starfield, visible even in daylight as they moved across the sky in perfect formation. By evening, they filled the horizon, sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around their hulls, beautiful and terrible in their alien design. The entire population of Rust Harbor gathered in the streets, craning their necks skyward and speculating in nervous whispers about what the arrival of a Dominion fleet might mean for their little backwater settlement. Think they're here to conscript us? Asked Tavi nervously, fingering the old service medal he sometimes wore. More likely here to establish a military base, suggested Mira Sennert. We're perfectly positioned to monitor the outer rim trade routes. Or maybe, said a young repair assistant who had recently started working for Wren. They're here for something else entirely. The knowing look she gave Wren made him wonder just how much gossip had spread about his mysterious blue-skinned client. The answer came at dawn, when a single shuttle detached itself from the lead vessel and descended toward the settlement's makeshift landing pad. It was elegant in design, clearly built for diplomatic rather than military purposes, and when the boarding ramp lowered, the figure that emerged wore ceremonial robes rather than battle armor. She was flanked by guards, of course, but their weapons were ceremonially sheathed, and their postures suggested honor guard duty rather than invasion force. Nalani herself looked exactly as regal and untouchable as Wren remembered her. Silver blue hair braided with threads of precious metal, her clothing obviously worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. But when her eyes found his, in the crowd that had gathered to witness this unprecedented event, he saw a flicker of the woman who had shared his bed and whispered his name in the darkness. Citizens of Rust Harbor, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the square. I am Favir Nalani of the Cerulean Dominion. I come before you not as a conqueror, but as a petitioner. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sovereigns didn't petition Antoine, especially not the inhabitants of insignificant frontier settlements. 6 months ago, one of your own provided aid to a Dominion citizen in distress. This act of kindness was rendered without thought of reward, without knowledge of the person being aided, and without expectation of recognition. Her eyes never left Wren's face. It was, in short, the finest example of human decency and compassion that I have witnessed in my 16 years of rule. Wren felt every eye in the settlement turn toward him, but he couldn't look away from Nalani. There was something different about her, something that hadn't been there during their last meeting. She looked lighter somehow, as if some great burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Today I come to offer that citizen a choice, she continued. The Dominion has need of people who understand that true strength comes not from power or authority, but from the willingness to help others without thought of personal gain. We have need of people who see past titles and ranks to the person underneath. She stepped forward, and the crowd parted before her like water, allowing her to approach Wren directly. When she stood before him, close enough to touch, she smiled. And it was Lyra's smile, warm and genuine and completely without pretense. Wren Blackwell, she said formally, I offer you a position as my chief civilian advisor. You would help me understand the needs and concerns of ordinary people throughout the Dominion. You would speak truth to power, when others might be tempted to tell me only what they think I want to hear. The crowd was dead silent now, hanging on every word. Wren felt like he was drowning in the enormity of what she was suggesting. Your Excellence, he managed, his voice rough with emotion. I'm honored, but I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about politics or diplomacy or, you know about fixing broken things, she interrupted gently. And the Dominion, I have recently learned, is very broken indeed. Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. What happened? The hegemony made a tactical error, she said, her smile turning sharp and dangerous. They underestimated exactly how devious I could be when properly motivated. They moved too quickly, revealed too much of their hand. Her expression softened again. And it turns out that having someone to fight for makes me much more formidable than fighting only for abstract ideals. You won? We won. I took your advice about the resource allocation patterns, by the way. It led us straight to their network of informants. The Dominion survived, reformed, and emerged stronger than before. And I learned something valuable about the difference between ruling through fear and leading through hope. Ren felt his world shifting around him again. But this time it wasn't the disorienting vertigo of having his assumptions shattered. This time it felt like pieces clicking into place. If I said yes, he said carefully, what would that mean? Practically speaking, it would mean leaving this place, leaving this life behind. It would mean court politics and state dinners and endless meetings with people who will alternately try to use you or dismiss you. She paused. But it would also mean helping to build something better. And it would mean, her carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. It would mean I wouldn't have to spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. The crowd around them seemed to fade away until there was only the two of them, standing in the dusty square of a backwater settlement, while a Dominion fleet waited overhead. Are you asking me as my sovereign, or as Nalani? I'm asking as a woman who fell in love with a mechanic and discovered that sometimes the most important repairs are the ones you make to yourself. The words hit him like a physical blow. Love. Are we using that word now? I am. Is that a problem? No, it's just... Ren ran a hand through his hair. This is all kind of overwhelming. Yesterday, I was fixing a moisture vaporator for old Jenks, and today, the ruler of 800 worlds is telling me she's in love with me in front of half the settlement. A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd, breaking some of the tension. I could have been more discreet, Nalani admitted, but I've found that making grand gestures tends to discourage opposition. No one wants to be the first to object when there are 53 warships overhead. Good point. Ren reached out and took her hands in his, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from the guards and the excited murmur that ran through the crowd. But what about the dynasty? The bloodline? Don't Hirans have to marry other royalty or something? Nalani laughed, and the sound was pure joy. The Cerulean Dominion was founded by a former prisoner and a smuggler captain who fell in love during a rebellion. I think they would approve of my choice. And if I'm terrible at being a civilian advisor, then I'll find you a nice workshop somewhere in the capital and let you fix things while I run the Dominion. As long as you're there to remind me what I'm fighting for. Ren looked around at the settlement that had been his home, at the simple life he'd built from the wreckage of his past. Then he looked at Nalani, at the woman who had stumbled into his workshop as a stranger and was now offering him the galaxy. Will you still make that awful coffee in the mornings? If you'll still complain about it, and then drink 3 cups anyway. Ren nodded slowly, a grin spreading across his face. Well, when you put it like that, he lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, earning a collective gasp from the crowd. Yes, Your Excellence. I accept. The cheer that went up from the assembled citizens of Rust Harbor was probably audible from orbit. Nalani stepped closer, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek. No regrets? She asked softly. Ask me after my first state dinner. I hear Dominion formal wear is really uncomfortable. She laughed and pulled him down for a kiss that tasted like stardust and possibility. While overhead, the Dominion fleet waited to carry them both toward a future neither of them could have imagined. As they broke apart, both breathing hard and grinning like fools, Ren caught sight of Tavi wiping tears from his eyes. About time, the old boarding house keeper called out. We were starting to think you'd never figure it out. Figure what out? Ren called back. That you've been moping around like a lovesick teenager for 6 months, Mira shouted from across the square. Even my cantina's strongest drinks couldn't fix you. Nalani blushed, a delicate purple tint spreading across her cheeks that made her look adorably human, despite her alien features. I think, she said quietly, that might have been the point. What do you mean? The assassination attempt. My ship just happening to break down in this system. Landing at the one settlement with a mechanic skilled enough to repair advanced Dominion technology. She shrugged. Perhaps the universe was trying to tell me something. You think it was fate? I think, she said, stepping closer until they were sharing breath, that sometimes broken things find their way to exactly the person who knows how to fix them. Ren wrapped his arms around her, lifting her slightly off the ground as he spun her in a circle, her laughter ringing out across the settlement like music. When he set her down, she was still smiling, but there was a more serious note in her expression. "There's something else," she said. "Something I haven't told you yet. More revelations? I'm not sure my heart can take it. The position I'm offering you, it comes with certain responsibilities, certain expectations." She took a deep breath. The Dominion recognizes the bonds formed between those who serve together in times of crisis. If you accept, if you come with me, you would be not just my advisor, but my acknowledged partner, my consort. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ren felt his throat go dry. Are you asking me to marry you?" "In simple terms, yes. Though sovereign union ceremony is the official language. Let me get this straight. I fix your armor. You disappear for 6 months. Then you show up with a fleet and propose marriage in front of the entire settlement? When you put it that way, it does sound rather impulsive. It sounds completely insane." Yes, she didn't deny it. But so is ruling 800 worlds. So is expecting one person to make decisions that affect trillions of lives. So is finding the one person in the galaxy who sees you as you truly are. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "If I've learned anything in the past 6 months, it's that the most important things in life rarely make rational sense." Around them, the crowd had gone silent again, sensing the gravity of the moment. Ren looked into Nalani's indigo eyes and saw his entire future reflected there. Terrifying and wonderful, and completely impossible, except for the fact that it was happening. "You know I'm going to say yes," he said finally. "I was hoping. But I have conditions." Her eyebrows rose. "You're negotiating with a sovereign. I'm negotiating with the woman I love." He grinned. "First condition. I keep my workshop. Maybe not here, but somewhere. I need to be able to work with my hands, to fix things. It's who I am." Granted, the Sovereign Palace has an entire engineering division that could use someone with your skills. Second condition. We visit Tavi and Mira and everyone else at least once a year. This place, these people, they are family. Also granted. I think regular visits to the frontier would be good for a sovereign. Keep me grounded. Third condition. He paused dramatically. You have to let me teach you how to make real coffee. Not that recycled swill they probably serve at the palace. Nalani threw back her head and laughed, the sound echoing off the simple buildings of Rust Harbor. I think that can be arranged. Then yes, Your Excellence. I'll be your consort, your advisor, your mechanic, and anything else you need me to be. She kissed him again, fierce and joyful and full of promise, while the crowd cheered and the Dominion fleet waited overhead to carry them both toward their new life together. As they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, one of Nalani's guards approached discreetly. Your Excellence, he said quietly, the Council is expecting your return within the week. The inauguration ceremony for your consort will need to be arranged, and there are 23 different ambassadors requesting audience. Later, Commander, Nalani said without taking her eyes off Ren. Right now, I'm exactly where I need to be. She turned to address the crowd one final time. Citizens of Rust Harbor, the Dominion will not forget your kindness to one of your own. This settlement is hereby declared a protected world, under direct sovereign patronage. Trade agreements will be established, infrastructure improvements funded, and your independence guaranteed. The cheer that went up this time was even louder than before. Ren shook his head in amazement. You're going to make them rich. They gave me the most precious thing in the galaxy, Nalani replied simply. It's the least I can do. As the sun reached its zenith overhead, and the Dominion fleet glittered like scattered diamonds against the pale sky, Wren Blackwell, soon to be Consort Wren of the Cerulean Dominion, kissed his sovereign one more time, and marveled at how beautifully the universe had conspired to bring two broken souls together and make them whole. "You know," he said as they walked toward the shuttle, "there's going to be a learning curve. I don't know the first thing about being a consort." "And I don't know the first thing about being in love," she replied. "I suppose we'll figure it out together." Sometimes, Wren reflected, the most important repairs really were the ones you made to yourself. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very patient, you found someone who not only helped you fix what was broken, but made you stronger than you'd ever been before. The shuttle's engines hummed to life as they boarded, and Wren caught one last glimpse of Rust Harbor through the viewport. His old life, his simple existence, the place where he'd learned that love could find you even in the most unlikely circumstance. "Ready?" Nalani asked, her hand warm in his. For a life of royal politics, interstellar diplomacy, and explaining to snooty nobles why there's engine grease under my fingernails. Wren squeezed her hand gently and said, "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they rose toward the stars, and whatever future awaited them among the 800 worlds of the Cerulean Dominion, where a mechanic and a sovereign would prove that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness.